Good. We are ready to get started. Welcome. We've still got people joining, so we're going to give them another minute yet. But I'd like to welcome everybody back. I hope that most of you heard the prior week's programs. Our first week was all about the data and the patterns and trends that people were seeing. And then last week, we heard what was happening on the flex work environment and about sustainability and well-being. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion today and hearing about what other designers are thinking and seeing. So I think we're all aware right now there's a lot of options out there. I think there's a lot of organizations that are just trying to figure out, what's best. And I've been involved in some conversations where people are thinking very differently about the office. So I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. Good. We've got about 60 some people on board, so I think we're going to get started. So welcome. We're ready to jump in. This is our third week of program, so thank you for attending. It's great to have all of you here. I'm Bob Fox, principal at Fox Architects and the publisher of Work Design magazine. And we're starting to see organizations get back to the office. So what does that look like? What are the issues that the organizations are dealing with, and how's that shaping our work environments? I think most of us are all still trying to figure some of those things out. Today, we're continuing a series of programs that Work Design magazine has put together in an effort to provide a comprehensive look at getting back to the office. We call the program Work Design Flex, and that's because it's looking at how much more flexible and multidimensional the workplace is becoming. So the ground has shifted, and the first week we reviewed the data. We looked at the patterns and trends that people were seeing. Last week we reviewed the flex work environment and the options that people had and well-being issues. And now this week, we're going to take a look at an issue that's close to my heart, which is how the office is evolving and the issues that are shaping that design. So the workplace is still important, but it's being used in very different ways. And from what we've seen so far, we know that the quality of the environment is key to getting people back. There's increasing options, rapid change, lots of experimentation, and then there's uncertainty and confusion. And on top of that, there's a lot of different opinions. And so we hope that through this conversation that we can offer some insight and intelligence into what's happening and the options that are best for you and your organization. Briefly, Work Design magazine was started 10 years ago as a place where the industry could share ideas, raise the bar for the level of knowledge that we provide. And if you look at the content that we've provided, it's been a big success, mostly due to people like yourselves that want to continue to improve their knowledge and maintain the value of the services that we all provide. So Work Design magazine's become a tremendous resource for the workplace industry. It remains open to all and it's free to participate. So if you're not already a subscriber, subscribe now and you'll get our weekly newsletter with all the updates to the website each week. Before we get started, the first thing I want to do is thank all the presenters and their teams. It's been great working with all of you. We appreciate your support. I know you guys are really busy, and your generosity and contribution of time and expertise is really valuable, so thanks. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, especially Envoy, who are critical to support the conversation and enable all of us to learn more. And a big thanks to all of you that are participating here today for your support. And finally, to my team that pulls all of this together, I feel fortunate. I've got a great team that stays on top of all of this and does an excellent job. Today's program is focused on looking at the issues that are driving change in the design of office space. And we're very fortunate to have a great panel today to discuss the range of topics that we're seeing. I think the bar has been set. Our work environments must be sustainable, energy efficient, and healthy places to work, both for our planet and for our own health and performance. These environments must be productive, inspiring, and engaging places to work, or I think we'll see our people will probably stay at home. I'm very excited to have McKenna leading the conversation today. Welcome, Caitlin, and thanks for being here. I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had on workplace and related issues, and I've been impressed with your vision leading the conversation around technology, well-being, space, services, and experiences within JLL. I think you bring a very unique and surprisingly refreshing perspective, very different from the traditional real estate company. Caitlin leads experience services, facility management, and design within the Work Dynamics product group at JLL. She's focused on delivering business outcomes for clients through improved human-centered metrics. She guides the design of technology, service, and space that promotes happiness, health, and high performance of the workforce in a modern world. Caitlin came to JLL following 10 years at Hilton Worldwide, leading customer experience, product, and innovation across a broad portfolio of 17 brands, as well as the design and operation of Hilton's Innovation Gallery. And she's held various roles in the commercial real estate investment world. So Caitlin, thanks. I'm really glad to have you on board today. I'm going to hand this over to you to start the conversation and introduce the panel. So.
Wonderful. And thank you, Bob. Really do appreciate the introduction. And it's truly wonderful to be here today with you, the panel, and of course, our great group of listeners. As Bob mentioned today, we're certainly going to continue the conversation around future of work and workplace design. Each of us here on the phone today have studied the future with probably more scrutiny than ever before. It's a highly ambiguous, highly uncertain time, and we all have guesses of what the future holds, and that when we realize it will be more interesting in retrospect. But we've listened to the workforce, we've listened to our clients, we've strategized, and we're here as a group to hopefully deliver on the evolving workplace landscape. Today, like Bob mentioned, we want to talk about what the new office looks like, and I hope you will all engage in the conversation. We'll reserve a few minutes at the tail end of the call for questions, of course, but please do feel comfortable inserting a question in the chat should you have something to ask any one of our panelists along the conversation. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our fabulous panel and industry experts. They've got a lot of great insights to share with you today, and pleased to be with them. First, we've got Erik Lucken, Strategy Director of IA. For the last decade, Erik has studied the intersection of business, performance, and the workplace environment, focused on the design imperative to support both how and why people work today. We've got Tom Polucci. He is a senior principal at HOK. As the Director of Interiors for HOK, his focus on creating multi-dimensional experiential environments that enhance the lives of people who use them. Tom has special expertise in workplace design, which makes him perfect for today's conversation. Pablo Quintana, he's a principal at Stantec. Having worked with leading Fortune 1000 clients over the years, Pablo sees design as a process of transformation, rethinking ways of working to enable organizational culture, identity, brand, as well as one that strives to connect people and create a better community through human-centered design. And we've got Jamie Feuerborn, Principal of Workplace Strategy at Moudis Associates. With nearly 20 years of experience in workplace strategy, interior design, and project management, she takes on a unique cross-discipline perspective, incorporating technology, people into long-term workplace and real estate decisions. I would love to just kickstart the conversation. And again, please do insert your thoughts, questions, and we'll make this a robust conversation. I'll start with Pablo. Pablo, some companies have made the shift to hybrid. We've all studied it and prepared for the return. Headlines are talking about this as the new way forward, affording flexibility. But I want to know your opinion. Are we really in the midst of a fundamental shift where the construct of the 9 to 5 and the 40-hour work week is really a thing of the past? Are we now truly in a hybrid world?
Thanks, Caitlin. First of all, let me thank Bob, Katie, and the Work Design magazine team for inviting us all to participate in this chat. And Caitlin, thank you for moderating. So it's interesting that over the past, I've been doing this for about 30 years. Most of that has been focused on workplace design, tenant design, and never in those 30 years has the conversation about workplace become part of the lexicon of the world, right? All of a sudden, the 6 o'clock news is talking about workplace, right? They're talking about what its impact is, what the notion of an empty city is, what the notion of the sort of displacement of people to the suburbs or elsewhere to work at home and what that impact is on everybody's life. So yes, in a very real way, we are in a hybrid world right now. And the question is where will we be still in a hybrid world a year or two down the road, right? I think that is the big question at the moment. There's no doubt we have all, think about what everybody's done over the past year and a half. We've retooled our homes, right? We bought gear, we got ourselves better Wi-Fi, we increased our bandwidth, we kicked the kid out of the basement and made our basement our home office. Think about the panelists today. I think 4 out of the 5 of us are actually doing this from home. Jamie's at work. So this is literally what hybrid looks like, right? And hybrid is not a new term. It's been around for a while. We've had activity-based work, we've had on-demand work, but we never had it at this scale, right? And we've never had, and we had to jump into it headlong, so we don't really know its impact yet. We are about to, the data is coming out suggesting what the impact of it is to everybody participating in this experiment. And again, the question is not so much a question of whether we are in a hybrid environment, is whether we will maintain the hybrid environment as a viable way of working for all of us.
Yeah, Pablo, it's interesting you say experiment, because it's assumed in some ways that this has never been done before, but in actuality, it really has been done in the past. Erik, you're here with us. I want to ask you to that effect. While hybrid is not new, there have been instances over the course of time where hybrid was faltering. It wasn't a successful model. Are we going to experience a similar challenge, or will this new era of remote work be successful?
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. It really is interesting. In some ways, the talk right now around remote work is if we all of a sudden discovered it in 2020, and it really has, as Pablo said, it's been around for a long time. You can find articles in the 80s about remote work. But really, in the years, as you said, up to the pandemic, the big story was really a lot of organizations pulling back from these programs. I think the thing to acknowledge is that a lot of these programs were enormously successful for the first few years. Employees loved them, productivity went up, there were significant real estate savings, there's a great sustainability story. But over time, the social cohesion of the organization started to fall apart. The physical workplace, this idea of having people come together in it every day, that does create this center of gravity. And that gravity does, in some cases, hold an organization together. So, importantly, remote work success during the pandemic, as Pablo said, that doesn't ensure success over the long term. So looking forward, I think there will be companies who pull off remote work, but there are also going to be a lot that fail. So for thinking about design, the advice that I have for any organization kind of leaning into remote is one, that program should always be in beta. It should closely monitored, constantly tweaked. And 2, have an escape plan. The desire to cut real estate is totally understandable, but don't box yourself in. Have a plan in place in case hybrid doesn't turn out to work for you in the way you expected, and you need to accommodate more people on site full time. There are thousands of ways hybrid can go wrong, only a few paths that it can get right. So again, carefully monitor and have an escape plan.
It's interesting you say social cohesion. I think that's such an important point to make. And with that in mind, a lot of folks have said that the purpose of the office will shift and become more of a space for socialization, for meetings, and deep collaboration that just simply can't be successful remotely or in disparate work environments. I would say, knowing this dynamic, and I'll put this question to Tom, what will the office of the future look like, and how will it appear different or function differently as people return and beyond, knowing, of course, that's not going to be universal at this stage, but perhaps over the course of time?
Sure. Yeah, it's so my opinion is I don't think it's going to change a whole lot in this period of time. I think we're all going to just try to figure out how to operationalize this and get people comfortable. I think a lot of organizations are spending time and capital talking to their people, trying to figure out what's going on with them. And as we were discussing before the start of the panel discussion, every organization is a little different. Every organization is spread across multiple regions of a country, of the planet, and they're trying to look at this from multiple lenses. And it is a challenge. I think it's mostly, God bless them, an HR challenge and trying to really understand the impact that it's going to have on people. I think in terms of the design of space, I think right now it's going to be made up of a similar set of pieces. There'll be meeting rooms and places to touch down, places to socialize. I think what's going to change is the ratio of those spaces. Probably, more of some space, less of others. But to your point, Caitlin, about the notion that the office is going to be designated as a place for deep collaboration, socialization, and culture is true, but it's also impossible to say that's all we're going to do while we're in the office. I still need to answer emails. I still need to mentor someone. I still need to have a challenging conversation with a client, maybe. All that stuff still has to happen in the day, wherever I might be. So we need to ensure that there are spaces in the office where I can do individual heads down focused work. I could meet with small groups of people impromptu. I can meet with people in a more formalized way. And I think all of this, we have to layer on top of all of this space, the level of technology that's going to be needed to for all of us to get together and do our best work. So I think we're going to see a definite increase. We're already seeing with our clients in terms of the kinds of technology where you're getting people together, both virtually and in person. And a lot of our clients are very concerned with the level of equity that exists in that meeting. So how are we getting technology so that we're all not little boxes on a screen, but that there is some way of making a more of a connection across these wires in a way that is meaningful and it creates enough fairness so that everyone can participate in their most full way possible.
Yeah,
I
very
wanted to
good.
add to, if I may, to what Tom was saying. I think what has to happen before we leap into the idea of what things look like, right? Whether there's too much of this and not enough of that, is how we engage in the conversation with our clients about what they value most, right? Given what they know now that they didn't know a year and a half ago. So the engagement tools, we all have, as professionals, a set of engagement tools that we use: visioning sessions, focus groups, surveys, what have you, right? Those things probably have to be retooled, right? A new set of questions have to be added that weren't there before. How many people are going to be working from home in your organization versus how many people are going to be? That question was really seldom asked, right? You created a program based on a set of characteristics that were fairly universal with some tweaking for an organization. We're now creating a set of activities, right? We really are kind of leaping from X's and O's to like what activities are going to happen and where would they happen best. I totally agree with Tom. You're never going to get rid of focus space at work, and you're never going to get rid of collaboration elsewhere. Yeah. But which activities can happen in a better way and what the setting for that should be, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a phenomenal leap or a phenomenal evolution in the way we ask the question about what work is.
That's right. And Pablo, I love that you said that you're asking new and different hard questions that were never there before. Some of them, to your point, are employer facing questions around who will do what and where and what sort of culture they want to present when folks come back. But there's also a new dynamic that I'm really passionate about, and it's around the people who are coming back and the workforce at large. As you know, over the course of the past year, new habits have been developed. There are new expectations and new relationship with their employer, the employee and the employer. They've adopted new ways of working and a new daily ritual that will inevitably be appended upon their return. I think one of the most important things is for all of us to realize as we design new spaces, consult on workplace and workplace design, is how do we meet the needs of the workforce and make it better than we left it a year and a half ago, left the workplace better than a year and a half ago. And perhaps help construct a space that is more synergistic with the rest of their life composition. So I want to ask Jamie a question around design and how designers should be responding to this shift. And I think, do we need to be thinking about this in pilots? Do we need to answer the questions that Pablo stated with a client and design a complete overhauled space? How do we approach this as experts such that we deliver on specific outcomes, but make sure that we're not going all in and make mistakes along the journey?
Yeah. So I have to say, and I can't remember, Tom, we were talking about it pre or if it was like part of the intro when you were just saying, but one of the things, like as a designer, as a workplace strategist, I have always loved what I do. Like I enjoy talking about the workplace, understanding it, looking at it. But when COVID hit, there was like this new renewed sense of responsibility. I was like, wait, there's different value, different eyes, like there's a different kind of importance and stuff about the workplace and how we as professionals think about it and how we educate our clients and participate in it. And none of us have that crystal ball to know what it looks like. And so a lot of it is that experimentation. It's testing out things. It's kind of seeing how it goes. So it's not so much that it's like, we've done this experiment, Pablo, I think were you saying like the experiment, right? Like it's been this experiment, but it was a very controlled experiment. Like one, we were all in this together. The whole entire world was doing it. There was shared empathy with everyone. And you already had that trust and strong connection with a lot of your colleagues. And Erik, you're saying that like a lot of the companies that were doing this prior to COVID, it works really well like the first couple of years. And then that's where that, the disconnect of kind of the culture might start happening. And so now as more employees start and you're looking at mentoring and training and that sense of community, and we're creating more of a distributed workforce, like some people being in the office and some people working from home, and people are traveling now, and it's not like you can just get a hold of somebody. So we're learning all together in this whole new way of working. So the pilot is, everything is not, it's in that beta. Caitlin, as you're saying, like we're constantly kind of testing and looking at this. And I think when it comes to pilot, like Tom, you're saying, like it's not like we're not seeing a drastic change right now. Like I think we still need to see how this kind of settles down and what it looks like. But there's definitely things around like technology and room layouts and certain things that we can start testing and piloting at a low cost in certain locations to say, does this layout work really well for that equity in the meeting rooms? And maybe if we're moving to unassigned seating, let's get a few lockers to see how people are liking that use of it, and removing things at some of the desks or trying out some different styles of work settings. Like one of the things when we collect data, we would always look at our benchmarking reported, we looked at a traditional desk as being the desk, like it was your work desk, it was your office, that was a work seat. And then you had alternative spaces, but I think a lot more of those alternative spaces are solid work seats. Like as long as it's relatively ergonomically comfortable and has the technology, we can connect a lot of different places. So I think that's what we can kind of pilot and test out over the next year, is all these different kinds of settings to really, it's a very iterative process that we constantly need to be learning and going back to and measuring everything, as Pablo said.
Yeah. You said, assigned seating or desks and so forth, and it just got me thinking around, that is something very specific that needs to be addressed. Will people be there 10% of the time or 100% of the time? And how do we design desks and seating to support the workforce, for example? So there's so many different design considerations that we need to contemplate that we're really not at the forefront perhaps before. So I want to open it up to the entire panel, Tom, Erik, Pablo as well. What other design considerations that are really uniquely different than say, for example, projects you've had in the past? Give us some color around something that just is new and fresh in your world of work that you see perhaps will apply to others.
Start. I'm fascinated by the notion of prospect and refuge. So the idea that someone as an individual wants to feel safe and have some level of control or containment around themselves, but also be able to see the activity going on. So I think there's a real opportunity for, especially on the product side, to start to understand and look at ways in which that we're creating some level of shelter in the open office environment that gives people that sense of kind of a little bit of protection or cocoon, yet still have that visual connection to the rest of the space, so you can actually see what's going on or make the choice to communicate with others. So I think the benching of, especially Jamie and I in New York, everybody's at 5 feet, maybe less, might be changing over, I think, in the short term. But then, are there going to be different models in which we occupy space at that individual level? I think is going to be very interesting.
I do think that what's exposed itself too is the personas, the various personas of the office place. And like you said, the cocoon. I think folks who probably didn't raise their hand to sit, to be one that would sit quietly, be better fit for a cocoon, as it were, probably didn't expose themselves. And now there's certainly a more comfortable, there's more comfortability around, letting your true persona come out, and then expecting that the way in which you operate is coddled to some degree. So Erik, let's go on to you. Give me some unique design conflict that you're working with right now.
I think one of the ones I'm most excited about, I think is going to be really fascinating, is that, again, this recognition of working across distance. Again, distributed teams, not a new thing as well, but certainly taken to a level we've not seen before. And so we have a number of clients that are really interested in exploring extended reality. And so we've started to do some really great work at IA around, virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, all these different possibilities, not to replace the physical workplace, but really as an enhancement, and really trying to create this, again, that idea of equity in terms of collaboration specifically. So, I mean, that's a whole new world. I think it's very exciting. And I think there's a lot of interest in kind of opportunity to see where that goes.
Very good. Thank you. And then Pablo, you as well.
So Tom spoke of the kind of the cocoon, right? And the idea of shelter and sort of, that I'm really fascinated by the complete opposite, right? I am, believe it or not, I'm an extrovert, and I'm completely fascinated by the idea of the office becoming an entire social, truly a social environment, a social event, right? And the idea that kind of do away with the trappings of the desk as the place or the destination being yours or ownership, right? The idea of kind of a truly social office, right? A place for people to kind of hover and connect in a very loose way, and find a corner that works for them for a period of time, right? And so that idea, right, is and it's kind of a very personal pursuit in a sense. So it's I'm a little bit biased in that direction. So I try not to force that bias on my clients. I try to listen to them, understand what they actually want, right, as opposed to what my bias is. But for those clients who tune into the idea of the office as a social construct and as a kind of a community of people, that's where I really want to sort of take this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of what you're describing too is around the notion of fluidity, and how do you create communities that enable a fluid day in the office, maybe for socialization, the experience of an amenity set, sitting at a vacant desk or workspace, whatever that workspace may be, and so forth. So I think that fluidity is a key, an important concept to realize in the future design. But it also brings me to think around technology and how technology is going to enable that fluidity and that socialization and that collaboration. So I wanted to ask each of you as well, what types of conversations are you having around technology, and what enabling technology do you think we need so that we're successful? And as it layers into the design of an office, it becomes seamless and truly a tool that drives strong socialization, collaboration, and so forth. Pablo, since when we're on you, let's ask you first.
So Erik mentioned augmented reality and other kind of hyper technological tools. We are talking about that. We're also talking a fair amount about spaces that are, the use of spaces, enabling spaces via applications, via mobile applications, in terms of understanding not only the use of the space while you're in it, but your path to it. Quite literally, like the traffic, flow, the between home and the office, and the optimization of that, right? Stantec has developed its own app. There are others are in the market too on the private side that enable you to do that. So that idea of being hyper aware of what's available to you, right? Before you even use it, right? And then you can plan ahead and invite others to plan with you. So that has been a something wasn't quite as much part of the conversations as today, I guess. So it's an evolution in the use of technology in the office and in the path to the office.
Right. Erik, would you like to shed a little bit more color on AR, VR, and other hyper technologies that you referenced? I think that's an interesting tool that I think is probably underutilized, but may have a strong future in the years to come.
It's really going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. And we've actually just embarked on a research program kind of looking at, particularly around diversity, equity, and inclusion, like the opportunities there to provide these environments that allow kind of this interesting equal footing, regardless of where you are, regardless if you're an introvert or an extrovert. And so I think it's like, do you exactly replicate the existing environment in this augmented reality? Do you create something that's like, at the bottom of an ocean? It's like there are so many possibilities, and I'm just so excited to see where this takes it. But again, there are so many clients that are really interested in exploring that to just provide this much more supportive and inclusive approach to collaboration. Again, I always say this, not replacing the physical environment, I think, but it really enhancing it.
Right. And I think things like AR and VR, they've been around for a while, and we've all experimented with them to some degree, but this, like so many technologies this year, perhaps we'll see a dramatic acceleration in terms of at least experimentation and or actual application in the workplace. So, okay, Jamie, let me know a little bit about technology from your perspective. What are you hearing from clients, and what sorts of things are top of mind as you assess how to enable a workplace through tech?
Yeah, on the technology side, it's definitely about the space utilization, the space booking. It's about the collaboration tools of coming together. It's about managing space and the experience. I think where we're going to be seeing a lot more growth in the technology market, or where we need to see more too, is that integrated technology system. So there's all the different apps and the programs and how they start talking to each other or working together to create a real seamless, intuitive system for like any employee. Like the idea too of like myself getting stats to know how often I was in the office, like where did I spend most of my time, like who was I interacting with the most. Those are great stats to have. But there is also, I'm just going to throw in right now, because I think there's the technology and then there's also the human aspect of it. And I think that's part of the conversation that we're having. Like, how do you get people back into the office? You want it to be easy for people too. So if everybody has to spend forever trying to do technology to connect to things, they're going to just stay at home. Like, that's easier to connect. So there's that ease, but it's also just knowing that you're there. So I think I look at it as like my gym, like when I would go to the gym. And Equinox, when you'd scan, like when I'd walk in for the day and they'd be like, "Hi, Jamie, welcome back." And I know they don't really know who I am because I didn't go that much, but they would know because of my card. Like when I scanned it, my name would pop up on the screen, and there's just something about somebody knowing you and calling out your name. So I think there's definitely this balance of, having support and people there that are greeting and the kind of the concierge or floor ambassador kind of idea, that there's this mix of it.
Yeah, there are two things that you said there that just feel very different than 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago. The first of which is, making face, in the office being a space where you needed to make face, and that constituted work. If you were there at 7 p.m., you must be working. And it was hard for folks to imagine a day where you were actually productive and performing at a high capacity at home or anywhere around the world. We all joke that there are folks working on a boat right now, but they're probably living their best life and delivering their best results at work. So I think that's something really interesting by contrast in years prior. The other thing you mentioned was integrated technology. And I just have to emphasize from my perspective too, I know I'm not a panelist here, but I think recognizing that point solutions are not effective in a world where we're all so disparate. We need the integration of those various point solutions from a tech perspective, data perspective, and so forth. And I think as companies imagine what the future will look like for them, it's best to do it in a cohesive fashion, integrated fashion, to your point, so that they realize the best outcomes for the workforce and the usability of those pieces of technology are realized in full. So two excellent points, Jamie. And I'll just move over to Tom and just let you close out this particular question with what's unique and different from a tech perspective as you see it.
I think right now, everyone's covered the subject really well. I think it is important, per Jamie's point, about the ability to understand utilization, ease of use for employees. Can I book a room? Can I book a desk? I think right now clients are trying to figure out how to do all of that in an expeditious way, especially if they never had done it before and they're trying to bring folks back into the workplace. So I think that's very top of mind. I'm interested in like what Google was covered in the New York Times around that integration of people being present in a space and not being physically there, and how to do that in the most effective way possible, I think would be is really cool and interesting. And it goes back to my earlier comment about equity, so that you're not a tiny little dot on a screen. Yeah,
let's talk about equity a little bit. And equity and just the expectations of the workforce. I know we've talked a little bit about design. We've looked at this from a client perspective. But I think what's really interesting is the real need to appreciate what the workforce needs and wants as they move into their future workspace. Let's get back to equitability, like I mentioned with Erik. Erik, tell me a little bit about design, the concept of equitability and how design might support that. We talk about meetings and letting equitable experiences come alive in meetings, but where else and what else can we consider from a design perspective to ensure that we're realizing equitability?
I think, and it's such a complicated issue. And I think that one of the things though, that we do kind of have to accept is that true equity, in terms of remote versus face-to-face, is maybe an impossibility. I think just in terms of human evolution, in terms of how we communicate, it's vocal tone, pacing, facial expressions, body language, all these things more than actual words, and video, phone call, all these things really do fall short. There's this, I read an essay recently by the architect Sarah Robinson. She put it so beautifully that video calls are like eating without tasting, like breathing without smelling. So, so it's really about, what is the next best thing? And then this is probably hedging the question a little bit too. I can tell you what I don't want the solution to be. And I think that the solution shouldn't be organizations kind of hamstringing in-office workers. So saying that, think about a meeting, if one person is calling and everyone has to call in, I don't think that makes sense. If people are coming into the office, having them work as if they were remote that's kind of ridiculous. So, I do hope that as we focus on equity for remote workers, it shouldn't be about pulling people down to the same level. It should be about elevating everyone up. I do think technology is obviously a really critical element there. You know, as Tom said, really focusing, especially not it hurts even, Tom, when you said it, like all the little faces. That's not how I want to interact with people anymore, even as we're doing it now. But again, just going back to it, you know, like even thinking about meetings, it's like, you know, often the meeting isn't the point. It's those interactions before and after. It's the people you see, you encounter on the way to the conference room. It's what you encountered as you were walking into the office. These are going to be really hard things to replicate, to duplicate. And so I think it's what is the next best thing. But, you know, I know everyone on the panel, none of us are going to like create less compelling workplace experiences. We're going to keep getting better and better. So that physical workplace, it's still an area of excitement for me, even as we look at kind of how do we incorporate remote workers in a more equitable fashion.
Yeah, and Erik, you mentioned, and I might I may quote you wrong, but you said something about helping people rise to the standard, not fall, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges I think leadership probably faces from a human resources perspective, just from a managerial perspective and so forth, is how you really help folks thrive in this new environment. And so I wanted to think about with the group here on the phone today a little bit about contemplations of leadership and how they navigate massive ambiguity, how they make crisp decisions when there is no black and white, and when they've got new challenges such as equitability in a meeting space because there's a virtual component to it. So maybe we'll move to Tom. I would like to ask, what are some key things leaders can do to position themselves to be successful, knowing all of this?
Yeah, it's so not about space, yet it is about space, right? So it's like the space has to follow a lot of what we're talking about, Caitlin. And so leaders, what I find fascinating is if we're talking about a project 2 years ago, you're working with real estate, you're working with facilities, you might have a meeting with HR, you might be having a meeting with the CFO, right? And now I think what's fascinating is our clients, especially at the C-suite level, are bringing a broader group of their leadership to the table to help work through all of these issues. So I'm working with a client currently where we've got at the table for all of our meetings, we have the head of equity and inclusion, we have HR, we have marketing, we have communications, both external and internal. And it's fascinating to watch all of them work through the hairballs that they have to in order to understand how do we manage these folks in a way that is fair to them, creates a lot of productivity, you know, enhances the bottom line. They have so much more work to do than we do, but we have to help them understand how do we respond to all of that in creating spaces to support their business, and what will they look like, or how will they change in some level of nuance now and then maybe greater later down the road.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think there are brand new people at the table these days, which is wonderful, because really, if you think about it, to deliver on experience, to deliver on workforce needs, it's got to be a conversation around people. So it's really a neat time. I want to pause for a second because I'm seeing some questions come through here in the chat. So if, let's see. I don't want to go back too much in time, but I do think it's important. So one of the questions here says, in regard to escape plan, can you please elaborate how this looks like for a designer? I'm trying to recall which of you said escape plan.
That was me.
That was you, Erik. So elaborate on escape plan. What does this look like?
So it really is. It's like, again, you're looking at it in terms of again, first understanding and monitoring remote work, but hybrid work, whatever the approach is. Constantly monitoring and being aware of and trying to anticipate where there are going to be cracks before they start to appear. Then in terms of that escape plan, it's really looking at, it's very, I mean, just as just a kind of a pragmatic look at how you accommodate people within the workplace. If it turns out that hybrid work is not, maybe only 1 to 2 days makes sense rather than 3 to 4, and maybe you actually have to start to accommodate a lot more people in the office. Having a plan in how that happens, whether there's lease space above that you have the right to access to at a certain point, whatever it's going to look like, just I'm really trying to I don't want to see people painted into a corner in terms of, we cut square footage so much. We need to bring people back. We've got no place to put them. It's I think it's just going to be so important moving forward.
Yeah, very good. Another question we have here is there a resource, perhaps an introductory guide that an architect can reference and research to help encourage involvement with senior management and leadership, non-designers, to design and participate in these collaborations addressing workplace issues? Is there anything that you all reference, or are we in this learning all together mode that we don't actually have a guide just yet? What do you think?
I think the world of the survey and the mining, the individual, team, group, person, company or organization is the engagement at the beginning. I spoke about kind of changing the questions or tweaking the questions. That's really the guide, right? The guide is going to be, whereas in the past we may have relied on tried and true formulas, right? Like, oh, well, you're doing an activity-based work environment, and here's a good set of rules for that particular type of environment. Here's a good set of rules for an office-intensive environment, an open environment, or here's what another organization did recently, and you might want to look at them to profile yourself. I think that benchmarking, it's a little tough right now, right? Like the idea of benchmarking is almost like hit a pause button. You can't just benchmark. What are you benchmarking? I think what the question might actually be is about what the benchmark is for this thing going forward. And I think we're writing the benchmark now. And it was said before that we should, I think Jamie mentioned it, we should pilot it. We should, monitor it. So although I wish I had an answer where it said, oh yeah, we have this to look at and model this thing going forward, I think we have to wait 1 or 2 years before we actually have a benchmark to model. An actual operating hybrid model or models in different levels of office types, right? Different client types that we can actually then benchmark against.
That's right.
We have to build the benchmark up.
Yeah. And Pablo, go ahead, Jamie.
Sorry, it's not a one size fits all. So it's not like every organization, like even if it's like the same industry, like every company within that industry too, they work differently. Like they have different values and things that they bring, and how their teams collaborate and how they work together. Like, are people more individual producers and then come together once a month, to work on a final, or is there lots of cross collaboration happening, or teams, and all of that plays an impact on it. So part of it, I think we're all learning together as we go, but it's just being able to have lots of conversations and just read a lot to understand what's happening and kind of the lessons learned that people are talking about. And then it's also, as Paul was saying, like learning just about the organization, like what feels right for your company too.
Yeah.
I got to pile on that one real quick too, because I agree so strongly. It's like this idea that, for some reason, I think everyone got this idea where everyone's cutting real estate by 20%. I better cut real estate by 20%. It's like it just because that's going to work for this organization does not mean it's going to work for you. So it's like, it is worrisome to see this kind of group think that's happening around a lot of issues, because as Jamie and Pablo said, it's like, it's so unique to the organization, to the way they work. It's like, they've got to explore and figure out what's going to be the right way forward for you, not what your competitor is doing.
And arguably is who you're cutting who's being cut in the 20%, right? Like, so the notion might actually be, I'm a big proponent of like the 20% reduction, as in physical space reduction, should happen from the top down, not from the bottom up. So, those of us who enjoyed maybe larger portions of the real estate that don't really need it, have never needed it really, and now probably need it less than we did before. We should be the first ones to essentially contract, right? we shouldn't do it at the expense of kind of the, the staff or the rank and file, however you want to call it. To do it at it should actually start at the top. The real proof in this is if leadership is willing to do this, and leadership has to take the hit. I really kind of believe that, right? From a kind of a equity of space and an equity of use.
Yeah, Pablo, I think leadership there, that's a great, part of that question is around leadership, and how do we help leadership understand exactly what you're describing and participate with the workforce in any changes that occur and help facilitate the change that's needed. So I wanted to ask Jamie around change management, because there's an enormous undertaking with regards to change management, and there's an enormous undertaking for leadership to be those change agents. As you know, change starts from the top. And I think there's some new considerations here. So Jamie, can you talk a little bit about change management as it relates to the evolution?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting evolution because it's completely shifted kind of in where we were pre-COVID. We had a lot of projects that were in the midst of change management, and it was a totally different conversation than what we were having pre-COVID. I think a lot of it right now is really, it's the communication is key and the transparency. I think it's understanding that no one has the answer, and you're not ever going to have the correct, you're not ever going to have the 100% answer. So having regular communication with staff about like what's happening, how things are looking, like that is really important. And so there's kind of like the guidelines on it too. I think it's less about, yes, there's policies, protocols, maybe, but it's more just about guidelines. Like, what are the tools that individuals need to do their best work? Like they know best, or their teams know best of what's going to make them successful. So what does that look like? Tom, I think you were talking about too, like the manager, like just the sense of responsibility. I think it was you, like that people have now on them, like besides just the work that they were doing on a day-to-day basis, is like managing distributed teams and the equity and like, who's working remote and all of these things. And so a lot of training and communication. And it's not just it's not just a real estate thing. It's not just this HR. It's a very like holistic approach to bringing this into your workplace. And I think that's a key part in it, and kind of the team effort. So I think it's a lot of that. It's just us kind of learning as we go. Our jobs too as designer, like we're trying to create the best work environment so that all of these companies are successful in what they do every day.
That's right.
And they enjoy coming there.
That's right, Jamie. I'll take a second to look at some of the questions that are coming in from the crowd. I think it's important we tackle some of those today. One of them here says, one challenge we will see is how we balance the privacy of staff with the tech that tracks their every move. This is a hot topic for many. I know this is something that companies and people grapple with a lot. Maybe Erik, let's start with you. What do you think about technology as it relates to privacy in life and work?
Yeah, it's another complicated one. I can tell you that it does feel very strange in terms of some of the approaches to remote work and ensuring productivity, really monitoring workers that they should be at their computer nearly all the time. I think there's a really telling, this is kind of a sideline to this. It's like there's some study done during the pandemic on former office workers working at home, and they found that on average, workers were spending 4 more hours a day sitting than before the pandemic. And I think it's this idea that we are, whether we're being enforced by some monitor, but when working from home, you are tethered to your computer. You're not getting up to go to a meeting, you're just clicking to a different window. I think that there are so many kind of well-being implications. There's a lot of celebration around remote work, around work-life balance. That's questionable, I think. But I have concerns about all that kind of, again, that my life working remote becomes just this one computer, and that there are, that the tie to technology, there's a dystopian kind of feel to some of it. It's not in that utopian realm for me. Again, I think we're gonna learn a lot more, but I know that I have some discomfort with the idea of kind of enforced monitored productivity that I can't get up from my computer working remote. That doesn't sound great to me.
And can I jump?
Go ahead, Jamie. Yeah, please add.
So I think there's a couple different ways too to look at. There's one that some companies there's a compliance of private, like there's compliance issues to the privacy that they have. And that's kind of a different issue too of what's being monitored just from the work that they do. And then when it comes to an individual and just this thought of all this technology tracking what you do, we have already, there's a lot of things that already track what we do, regardless of any other technology that's being added to it. But I do think that people are less concerned about what's being tracked as long as you're getting something out of it. Like there has to be value both ways. So if I'm also able to get stats or like find my desk or know what's going on or connect with people, just like on our like iPhones, like we get so much value out of it that people don't seem to mind as much that you're being tracked on the other side, like different things are connecting and popping up. It's part of what makes your life, knowing that it makes your day-to-day easier too, that they have this that people have information, then I think there's a value to it.
And I wonder if some of this is generational too, because it's a bit ironic to talk about tracking when you're in social media and everything you do is being tracked, right? Every time I look at my Instagram page and I click on the ad for Nike, the next day I get 5 more, right? And because they just know what I'm looking at, right? So for those who might be a little bit concerned about whether they're being tracked in the office, they're being tracked by social media in general. And like anything else, if it's used properly, it will yield the information that is needed in order to evolve and make things better for you, right? The idea here is not a sinister idea of tracking. It's an idea of you actually having the technology that enables you to actually craft your day in a very efficient manner, right?
Yeah, like a perfect, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, a perfect example of this is Outlook has like the OneDrive. And if you guys get those 365 like alerts now that tells you when do you respond to email the most, how quick are you to respond, who are you collaborating with the most? Do you get those weekly like updates? At first it's just like, wow, it knows so much information, but I find so much value to that to see every week, like, okay, who was I communicating? Where were my busy days? Like, what did that look like? And you see that value and I'm like, okay, I don't care that it tracks all my email movement because I'm getting valuable information to make my day more productive.
Yeah, I think and we'll wrap up, but I do want to say, I think what I'm hearing some of you say is there's a question around the type of relationship that perhaps people want to have with their employer, and are they getting the value in return by working with that employer and using the technologies, the spaces, and the resources, and so forth that the employer provides. This has been a really lovely conversation. I want to hand it back over to Bob Fox, our chief here today, and just as well, thank each of you for your time today. Really wonderful conversation, and to the panelists, from my perspective, appreciate the questions and your ear today as we talk about the future of work. Bob?
Thanks, Caitlin. Wow, what a great conversation. It was just great to hear about all the issues and the deep insights and, all the challenges to how we're thinking about the workplace today. So I'd like to thank Caitlin, Jamie, Pablo, Erik, Tom. Great job. Really good stuff. So thanks. It's great to hear what you have to say. I think you guys have kind of forced all of us to think a little bit differently about our own work environments and how they're changing. So, and Caitlin, thanks for moderating. Great job. Lots of really good content. We're going to have a recording of this posted on the site, and we'll try to get answers to all the questions. We'll draft up a summary of this into an article. So you should be able to see that on the site soon. Next week, I think, is going to be another exciting conversation. We've got Rex Miller, Rex is an author and a thought leader, and he's been focusing on mental health in the workplace. And Kay Sargent, I'm sure everybody knows Kay. She's focused on neurodiversity, but's got a tremendous amount of experience on workplace issues. And the conversation is going to be around the talent equation: organization, workplace, the individuals. How do they connect? What types of policies should be considered? How's the culture changed with more remote work, and how does the space interact with that, and new rules and policies, and how people are using spaces. So come back next Wednesday at 11 o'clock and we'll continue that conversation. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye now.